I'm Gareth Moss, founder of The Blueprint. We facilitate business transformation by placing inclusive leaders. Welcome to the latest conversation with Game Changers, a regular interview series in which we sit down with a fearless leader from the industry. And fearless leader personifies today's game changer, Elle McCarthy. Elle is someone who has not only seen change, but overseen change in the creative industry. Whether it's presenting about gendered linguistics at the 3% conference or being an IPA woman of tomorrow, Elle spearheads the need for constructing a better kind of capitalism. So, coming live from Elle's Uber pad in the San Francisco Hills, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Gareth. Nice to see you again.
So, Elle, you've had a meteoric rise within the industry from BBH London to a move across the pond to EVP planning at BBDO New York, to where you are today in one of the most enviable positions in marketing, the VP of brand at EA. All of this by the age of 33. You are 33, right?
34.
34.
But I was going to go with it.
34. So what have inspired the choices throughout your career?
It's interesting. I've thought a lot about how to answer this question because I definitely think it's important to acknowledge that right at the beginning of my career, I didn't really feel like I was making choices. I described that period as a series of happy accidents and a lot of unhappy circumstances. As a woman entering the industry, a good over 10 years ago now, thanks for aging me again. I left jobs with nowhere to go because I was being asked to pick up the phones because I was a woman, despite being hired as a strategist. I've left jobs because I've been sexually harassed by the CEO. So often I haven't felt like I've really been making the choice. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as someone in a position of leadership now, for those people out there who don't feel like choice is always available for them, which is obviously much worse for people of color, particularly women of color. You can overcome those circumstances and get to a place where you are making more choiceful decisions. The three moves that you mentioned, sort of my three latest roles, obviously all were choices. And in those roles, I feel like I've made a habit of chasing the impossible problems. And in chasing the impossible problems, I think the most important thing has been that I've been looking for people who are willing to take that big bet on me, who are willing to see me and hire me for my potential and for my ideas and for how I think about addressing their challenges rather than necessarily for my experience, which was obviously really important, especially coming out of a long string of circumstances where I was experiencing quite a lot of issues as a result of my gender. So those three moves were really about transforming Virgin Media, taking that on and really transforming the culture first. Over a 2-year window, we ended up making award-winning work. We got a Silver IPA award for that work. I had a brilliant team. I took the role at BBDO New York to drive transformation for the agency and to also oversee a group. Crystal Ricks, again, amazing leader, took a big punt on me. She was told at the time that I was an unknown entity, and she said, yes, but I think that she's the best person for the job because of that. And I really value that she did that for me. But quite quickly after I joined, the biggest pitch in advertising history, which was a terrifying headline in Forbes and in lots of other business publications, came into the business, and it looked like an impossible problem to me. And the brief was to transform. And so I did hand raise for it. And Crystal looked at me and she said, you have no idea what you're signing yourself up for. And I said, I know, that's why I'm interested.
Could you say which brand it was?
Yes. Ford Motor Company. So moving from WPP to Omnicom after 75 years. I mean, that was the outcome because we did win the pitch. That was a wild ride as well. And then I really knew that I wanted to experience life on the client side. And so the challenge to rejuvenate the Electronic Arts brand after 40 years, that was, it is a huge, impossible problem. I've been told by many people inside the company, oh, people, when I first joined, people have tried to do this before, they don't work here anymore.
Yeah.
And we're going strong. But I think in all of these things, what I've learned is that what I uniquely can bring is that I can sit in the discomfort of my imposter syndrome. I have been called an unproven entity. I've been called risky. I've had people who find me threatening, publicly call me a fraud in businesses that I'm in. And I've sort of sat there and gone, I am willing to say that I am making this up as I go along. And I don't trust anyone who won't admit that. I don't trust people who are like, I have the solution, this is my proprietary model, because honestly, marketing is moving way too fast for anyone really to not think that we're all making it up as we go along. We are making it up as we go along. So I think that what I do in order to approach the impossible problems is to really own my imposter syndrome. I encourage other people to do it. I try and make my team feel like that's okay for them too.
And in terms of beyond EA as well, and going back throughout your career as well, what would you actually say is the proudest moment for you?
It's all of the small moments of bravery where I found my voice and allowed myself to come to the industry authentically through the lens of my values, through the lens of my purpose in the creative industries, now the gaming industry, which I see as making a better, safer, more inclusive space for other people. So I kind of center it. I didn't feel like that was very available to me earlier on in my career. And then there was this moment where I was quite settled at BBH, and I had Nigel Bogle as my mentor, who was absolutely amazing, very encouraging, very confidence building. And the advice he gave me was cut off your weaknesses and play to your strengths. And my strength, I had been told for a long time, was my bravery. And so I started to find my voice.
On that, is there anyone who's kind of really inspires you, like who is a real kind of brave kind of leader, that's kind of like helped you to get to this position today, who you kind of reflect on?
Yes, I mean, I can answer that in part through the person who's really been with me through like a big journey of finding my voice and has helped elevate my voice, and a person who I turn to in times of crisis and talk to is Kat Gordon, and has been Kat Gordon since I first met up with her in probably also in 2018. She was introduced to me by Heidi Hackemer, who is another woman who I really respect and admire and have turned to in those times too. Heidi's talked to me a lot about how she thinks that as women get older, they sort of flourish like phoenixes into their activism, and I see that in her career and in the work she does today, doing amazing consultancy work and coaching women and women of color and other people of color, focusing on education. She's really amazing. Kat is just someone who consistently does the right thing and who consistently challenges herself to become more intersectional, more inclusive. I think that watching the evolution of the 3% conference has been incredibly powerful. When I felt very angry and disappointed by the advertising Time's Up movement. I felt all of the things that I guess I felt very let down by some of the senior women in our industry and the way that they showed up in that moment, and kind of perpetuated white feminism. There was a lot of narrative around, well, I didn't experience this, or I don't see this, or this hasn't happened on my watch. The reality is we don't know what's happened on our watch. The reason that I speak so openly about these things is because I'd like people to feel like they can tell me what's happening online. But there's always going to be things that happen on your watch that you don't really know about. And I think there was a real lack of understanding of the ways in which second-rate white feminism can play into patriarchal systems, and a lot of white women have had success by assimilating into the male patriarchy, and therefore that's going to be really problematic for other women of color, trans women, anyone who is more oppressed. So that whole fake it until you make it, lean in thing, I find it really problematic. So when I was really troubled by that, the person that I turned to was Kat, and we talked a lot about it, and she helped me get through it in that moment. I wrote about that too, but then also recently I've been obsessed with this CEO in esports. Her name's Nicole LaPointe Jameson. She's 26 years old. She's
Wow.
CEO of eGeniuses.
Yeah.
She's amazing. She didn't grow up in the gaming industry. She actually grew up in finance. So she comes to this industry, which can be very culty, through her identity. She is a woman of color, and she talks about how disappointing it is that her position is so surprising to people and kind of so celebrated through the lens of her identity, rather than through the lens of being the best person for the job. And she drives incredible inclusion efforts for esports, particularly in Evil Geniuses, but I just think her voice will be so powerful even for anyone wanting to enter esports. I just find her incredibly inspirational, and it's amazing that she's 26.
That is amazing, even younger than you. And what have you actually adapted within you? I know we were talking about this on our last conversation. What have you kind of adapted within your own team? Because I know you've pretty much built your team at TA from scratch, haven't you, from the ground up? And I know you've built the most incredible, diverse team there as well, and values are so important to you as well. What have you put into place during that time in terms of your team?
The way that I've built the diverse team, which is something I talk to other people in the business quite a lot about, is just by building my network and my credibility in equity spaces. So that's where I talk about the roles that I have, or quite naturally, my LinkedIn network is a network of diverse people who have either started following me because of a talk that I've given or because of an article that I've written. And so having dedicated my career to all of these moments where I found my voice, I think it means that it's not difficult for me to hire diversely. So when I hear, when I go to a panel discussion and people say, it is really difficult to hire a diverse team, or recently a panel where I was disappointed to hear somebody conflate diversity of thought with this idea that that's just another option. So we can stop focusing on diversity because we've done that, and now we can focus on diversity of thought. The point of the narrative around diversity of thought is that you're less likely to get diversity of thought if you limit the talent pool who you're interviewing with. There is no data that shows that straight white men are better at math, technology, science, engineering, gaming, from an esports perspective. And so if you just limit your talent pool to one group of people, you're less likely to get diversity of thought, is the point of the conversation around diversity of thought. It's not something that we can weaponize as an and/or. So yeah, just still being really vocal about it. And then forming a team culture that feels inclusive and open, where we have a flat structure and everyone's voice is equally heard. The most junior person in my team, because he's Gen Z, is also a music producer on the side, and so he made the music for our big presentation, and I thanked him at the end. And really leveraging people's side hustles and hearing about them. So I guess that's how we do it.
And when you're actually looking to hire, obviously you've built this team. What is most important when you are hiring, a game changer for EA? What if there was one thing that you really look for over and above all else?
I've gone to work for people who are willing to take a risk on me, hire me for my potential, the ideas I have, rather than necessarily just from my experience, and who are willing to hire the whole of me. Because if you look on my LinkedIn profile, I can look like a risky person to hire because I'm very vocal about a lot of things that people feel are difficult to have somebody being very publicly vocal about. And so, you know, I make it really clear that I want people to bring their whole selves to work, that if somebody is active in an activist space, that I will be embracing of how we can apply that. And the way that I do the interviews is so simple these days. It's like this lovely formula that I've managed to develop, which is, I think that, you know, especially if you're trying to hire talent, you have to build trust from the off. And so I do say, like, look, this is going to be a weird interview because I'm going to tell you about the journey that this team's been on. I'm going to be really honest with you about where the team's at now. So I'm actually going to talk for the first 15 minutes, and then we're going to talk about one question that I have for you for the next 45. And people always go, okay. And so I lay it down. I lay down the good, the bad, the ugly of the journey, where we're at, how it would feel. And then I say, so knowing everything that you know, in fact, I do have two questions. I say, what do you think this job is? And then we'll talk about their interpretation of the job description, because that's a good way for me to course correct them a little bit to set them up for success for the real question, which is, how would you start?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just make space. And, you know, if someone's an introvert, I have to coax it out a little bit more. And I'll say, okay, so for example, like, how would you think, like, how would you categorize the challenges that we might have? If someone's an extrovert, they might just go, they might just talk for the next 45 minutes. More often than not, I know that I found the right person when by the end of the interview, they are chomping at the bit. They're really excited. Maybe they're sending me a follow-up email saying, I've just been thinking more about this. And that's my way of checking whether somebody is as comfortable with ambiguity as you'd need to be in this team right now, because it is pretty ambiguous what the path forward is, and I need everybody to want to define that together. And also whether somebody actually likes change, because I think we've made it very cool to say that we like change. I think that it's kind of like a corporate buzzword, like I'm a change agent. Obviously, we're talking about being a game changer now, but the reality is not everyone likes change, and businesses need people who really don't like change. Businesses need steadying people as well, people who underpin and can deliver against really long, slow, deliberate strategies. My team will complement that. I don't think that change is good and stability is bad. I just know that change is what's needed in this pocket.
So you are a diversity champion. You know, you're someone that I turn to in terms of diversity and advice within our industry as well. So let's go big. Let's say that you're in charge of the entire, I want to say creative industry, or obviously what you're in now is maybe more of the marketing industry. You know, how would you proliferate inclusion?
It's interesting because I think that we as the creative industry need to kind of understand how under threat we are, because I think the next generation is actually going to go to another space and just redefine what the creative industry looks like. I don't think they necessarily want our yellow pencils and our can lions and our systematic oppression. And so, you know, if you think about like who are the creators of tomorrow, they are your 13-year-old daughter who has already got a savings account with 100 grand in it because she's killing it on Roblox. And if she was to hear my story, she'd be like, okay, cool, I'm just going to be a TikToker, I don't need you. So I think, you know, you've got to think about kind of the market context that the creative industry is facing into if you're in charge of it. But I think, you know, the responsibility therefore would be to pave the way for that generation to come and disrupt us and to want to come and disrupt us, rather than to just go to the other space and redefine creativity as like stuff I do every day in a really casual way on my phone or on another screen. So I answer it through the lens of like, if I was made like the queen of equality, I think the most important thing that I do first is step down from being the queen, because I'm a white woman, and then put a woman of color or trans women in my place. And then I would make myself her aide. And so as the aide of the queen of equality, I would I would probably focus on making inclusion a financial mandate for businesses. And so I would tax businesses who didn't reflect census data, just as that. I think that's a nice easy proxy, that you need to reflect the census in your staff makeup and in the creativity that you put out into the world, people's ability to see people who look like them in your work, or the story, you know, authentic storytelling around that. I would require gender and minority equity pay reporting. You know, we in the UK, we gave businesses a COVID holiday in the same time that like women were the most likely to be furloughed or underpaid. I thought that was really shocking. So I'd bring that back, but I'd make it worldwide. You know, I'd have all businesses really focus on impact investors as where they were sourcing funding, which would then increase the meteoric rise of impact investors as actually just being investors, because I think over time the financial industry is going to be disrupted too, and it's going to need to be more purpose driven. And then I also think we have to create individual accountability at a leadership level. So I'd mandate tying leaders' individual compensation to their efforts in attracting, retaining, and promoting women and minorities with clear targets, like really clear publishable targets. Finally, and this might be a British reference, I would remove the knighthood for all people who have historically been reported to systematically bully women and minorities. There's a lot of people who have knighthood status in the UK today who are actually very problematic figures. And you know, I think this is a bit like the conversation about, you know, do we pull down the statues?
Yeah.
You know, if I had it my way, we would have a plaque next to the statues that like corrects and is a historical record of what those people did, because I think those people would like that even less than if their statue was abolished. And you know, people say, oh, we don't want to remove the historical record. Great, well then write it out next to the statue. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Wow, I wasn't expecting like a kind of a checkpoint list. That is very impressive. I think that's it, and I hope you know, the industry listens. There's so much change that can be made, and I think, you know, there has definitely been progress this last couple of years, but there's just so much more that can be done. And I think it's game changers like you, Elle, that will really help to spearhead that change. So on that, I'd like to wrap up and just say thank you, Elle, for being a game changer.
Thank you, Gareth. And thank you for helping me get where I got.
Okay, a pleasure, a pleasure.